This is episode 1 of Talking About Terrain. It's a really creative name, I know, but this is what made it off the cutting floor. So, I've always been the guy that tells everyone that hobby burnout doesn't exist, but after the holidays and COVID, I'm going to stop trying to preach to dudes that they're just lazy and they need to paint. It's kind of a naive state of mind. So what I'm going to do is provide the listener with something to put on in the background while they paint, make terrain, miniature painting, whatever they're doing, or if they're at work. I'm just going to record these episodes twice a week. So obviously the first question you want to ask is, why me? I'll just explain it and provide you with some good content. So I personally get pride from my work. Now pride is a sense of satisfaction. This hobby gives me satisfaction, building terrain, tables, whatever, painting miniatures. Now, according to my quick Google search, ego is the sense of self-importance. This isn't an ego blog, or I'm not trying to sell you anything. I don't take commissions right now. This is basically a hobby ramble. Most of this was inspired by the comedian Bill Burr. He runs a podcast called the Monday Morning Podcast, and I don't know, I like the casual, laid-back kind of style, the vibe he has going on. As a player of D&D and Warhammer, I like to think of myself mostly as a casual, what you would consider the generic trope of a beer and pretzels player. I want to get a buzz on, have some people over, or go to an event, and enjoy a game with some beautiful terrain and some well-painted miniatures. I'm not a tactics channel, I'm not anything serious, I'm not a professional pro painter channel that you would pay a Patreon for. You're going to get long, rambling monologues of me talking about terrain, or just other facets of the hobby. So in terms of my credentials to talk shop and talk about this, I'm not entirely talking into my ass. I'd like to say that I can paint miniatures to a tabletop quality, and I own most of the required tools. You'll see me use the Proxon and other tools in videos. I do not have a fancy YouTuber painter rack. I have a little area I work in, and it's good enough for me, and I can clearly produce a lot of stuff in my small area. I've also spent a few years commission painting full-time during college, and I've completed more than 40 armies of 100 or so models. I think I've painted 3,000 or more miniatures at this point, and I've worked on more than 20 full gaming size 6x4 tables at this point, filled with terrain. I don't really have any plans of ever returning to painting commissions, but I could talk about the subject at length and kind of inform you how that whole game works. Over the years, I've created an enormous amount of high-quality terrain, and that's probably the reason why you're here, and that's my primary talent. So, rambling about this, showing you examples, helping out, that's what I'm here to do. Most of my subscribers are going to be interested in my terrain, and that's going to be the primary subject in most of these recordings. I also moderate the terrain building subreddit, and run competitions over there, which I have to make a video on that in a few weeks when that gets wrapped up. Maybe eventually I'll get into 3D printing later this year, but for now, most of this is going to be scratch built, resin casting, old school methods, foam core, trash train, cardboard, all that fun jazz. So, for the first episode, I had a few notes on efficiency of consuming different content while you paint. Thought this would make a really cool introduction episode, and again, this is going to be the shortest episode. I'm just trying to get something out there. I'm going to release a second episode right after this, so you get a bunch of content to consume. So, talking about that content, I'm going to try and touch on the subject of efficiency and consuming media while you're painting. Now, these recordings, the ones I'm making, they're designed to be listened to while working. You're not really obligated to go look at the screen. Occasionally, I'll go over terrain builds that require you to say, this is step 13 or whatever else. Those are going to probably be separate videos. For this, it's going to be a slideshow of photos and just stuff you can reference. Also, I'll be uploading it as like a podcast kind of format after I do 10 or so episodes. I want these to also be useful for the hobby veteran who sort of nods their head along while I go over some more basic techniques, but I also want it to be really, really useful for a new terrain crafter or a hobbyist that is just starting out on their first few ruined buildings. Occasionally, I'll upload some narrative games where you get to see some pretty miniatures pew-pew each other in a battle report, and just talk about other areas of the hobby, but again, the focus is mostly going to be on a combination of talking about terrain, and also being efficient with your time, your materials, and your money when you're doing this hobby. This can get expensive, but I've kind of viewed terrain building as a much cheaper area of the hobby in comparison to building the new Flavor of the Month army or buying new kits and boxes. You can get away with using a lot of trash to build your terrain. Now on to the actual subject of this podcast. There are a ton of ways to pass the time while you paint. You can listen to music, you can listen to podcasts, you can listen to audiobooks, lore videos, TV shows, movies. You could sit in silence like a mechanical man and just do your thing. Now, besides movies and TV and stuff, what are some hobby-related content that you could watch or listen to? You can online watch some battle reports. These tend to keep you looking at the screen, but the ones that I don't find completely distracting usually have the bird's eye view, the top-down sort of view in like a real-time strategy game. That's about it. You can also watch painting tutorials. When you're trying to educate yourself on painting and improving, you probably won't find it that effective while you're already painting yourself unless you're actually following the tutorial. If you're just browsing random YouTube videos and kind of watching like, how to airbrush this, but you end up you're doing highlights or something else, it's not, you can't really casually listen and learn. You usually have to be kind of more hands-on. So painting tutorials aren't the best. What else can you watch in this hobby? You can watch animations or goofy movies or meme videos. You can watch lore videos, which could be anything from some guy reading out of his codex, or it could be like an actual retrospective or a breakdown of something. I personally like The Amber King. He's great. I've watched all his videos a few times at this point, just to kind of fill that void in the back. You can watch hobby news videos, or videos that talk about new releases, or rumors that will come out in the future, like updated models or rules for different armies you play. You can also watch unboxing videos, which are nearly always trash and low quality, unless you're about to take on a commission or you're buying a large model and you want to see the scale of something. Most of these videos kind of dog water, but hey, maybe you like watching unboxing videos while you paint. It's kind of up to you. You can also watch retrospective or breakdown videos on hobby topics or video games. These are always good if you're familiar with the content and you don't have to keep looking up. You can watch extremely long Dawn of War, Witcher, Dungeons & Dragons, or Total War Warhammer videos for hundreds of hours while you work on stuff. Something I never expected is you can watch a lot of TikTok content about our hobby, and some Instagram Reels for seeing what other people are working on, or whatever they're getting into, but I can't recommend avoiding this enough. Kind of just put a warning out there, you want to beware of the endless scrolling on Reels and the absolute decay of your attention span. And finally, we come to podcasts. These are great. However, our hobby kind of has a noticeable void. I'm always nearly tapped out of new podcasts or things to listen to. Like I have to go back to movies or shows because there's no new hobby podcast or anything to kind of dive into. Even if you don't particularly like some YouTubers or podcasts, you have listened to them, you have heard of them. I actually enjoy most of the podcasts and the content out. However, I'm basically waiting for them to upload videos. I'm always kind of like needing to consume content, because honestly I'm painting for 20 hours a week, if not more at this point. Hopefully I can plug myself into this rotation of podcasts while you build some terrain or work on something. Or hey, if you're not even into terrain, this can be a gateway just to hear some guy being really interested about building and painting terrain. Now, in terms of bad content to consume that's non-hobby related, personally I've found I want to avoid any kind of like gripping TV shows. If you're sitting down to watch TV shows, try watching The Wire or anything really plot heavy when you have to pay attention to the small details of like what you're highlighting and then you're trying to look up at the screen. You'll spend far too much time with wandering eyes. You'll keep looking up and down. I recently tried to watch the Daredevil show on Netflix, and anytime Kingpin or Fisk was on the screen, I was just like, I would get like kind of intrigued by that character, and I liked that part of the show, and I couldn't really, I would stop highlighting or painting for 20 minutes, and then I would go, let me get back to painting. It was a little too distracting, because the show was kind of intense, it was too gripping. Try and avoid movies you haven't seen before. You're not doing the movie or the show justice. You'll be tempted to focus on it. However, if you've seen a movie 30 times, go put it on in the background. I guarantee a large amount of people in this hobby have watched Lord of the Rings ad nauseum. And hey, if I put on Lord of the Rings, I love the soundtrack, it's a journey, it's a hero's adventure. I'm having a blast listening to it, but I barely actually look at the screen. Another thing is like Armies of Darkness, just like movies, one-liner kind of things, or like a TV show. If you like The Office, you can just put all The Office on in the background. You kind of understand what's going on, you don't have to look up and watch it. You can focus on what's at hand, but you can get yourself into the zone. What I'm getting at with these points is you don't want to get home from work, eat, chill for a bit, and then hunch over to watch a movie and barely progress on your painting because you're easily distracted. You won't feel that accomplished if you watch 3 hours of TV and now it's nearly midnight and you've only layered a few models when you planned on finishing the whole squad of 10 tonight. With our hobby, it's actually really hard for a lot of people to allocate time and hours to actually paint, work on their own stuff, or even like play a game. Most people I know are only playing pre-COVID, maybe 3 or 4 games of like Warhammer or like a once a month D&D night. unless you have it on Discord or Tabletop Simulator or something else. The time you invest in your hobby should be productive if you're going to bother with it. Now, this isn't a psychology video on various ways to put yourself into a state of extreme productivity or efficiency, or how to get yourself into the zone per se, but it should be more of a video of what should be obvious, but isn't exactly. I recently had a friend that was working on a bunch of models. He airbrushed them, everything was primed, he was good to go. He was just like, alright, now we're going to paint the details. And he didn't really paint anything for a week. He had a worse burnout than I did. He basically would tidy up his hobby area. He would place the models out on the table. He'd set up his tablet. He'd start watching One Punch Man Season 2, and then I think he jumped to JoJo. He was just like watching anime or whatever else, but he was reading subtitles, and he was going back and forth. And then he would guilt trip, and I got like an Instagram DM at 2 in the morning of just like, shit, dude, I popped an energy drink at 11 o'clock because I didn't paint anything at all, and I only got a few models done, so I ended up going into work almost hungover the next day because he just like wasn't productive with the 8 hours he sat down to paint. Maybe he painted for 3 of them and he would just roll his next day over, and you guarantee after he comes home from work the next day, he's probably not going to sit down and paint again. That one all-nighter might have knocked out 3 or 4 days of productive, let me paint for 2 hours after work, just because he watched shows in combination of feeling guilty, trying to catch up. It's not really a race. If you just like set up hours as I'm gonna paint Monday, Wednesday, Friday for 2 hours from 9 to 11 or something, is far more productive than I'm gonna do an all-nighter, I'm gonna get a burnout, I'm not gonna feel it, and then you're gonna force yourself to paint Saturday morning. I doubt it. Now why I'm talking about this is I felt this in my soul. I'm guilty of this as well. I'm guilty of this primarily with video games, but also some shows. Let's go play a game of Counter-Strike, paint, and then queue up again. I would get this weird loop of telling myself hey, if I could play a game, and then I would go back to painting, and then after an hour I would go back to queuing up and playing again. And what would end up happening is this would equal out to 10 minutes of painting and 2 to 3 hours of CSGO. I'm absolutely astonished that I managed to dodge the World of Warcraft Classic bullet. My friends have been playing since release and raiding for most of it. I would have joined them, and it would have been a massive commitment, and my hobby would have suffered. If they're playing 30 hours a week, I would have had to keep up with them, and raiding and getting attuned and gear. Now, the question is, would I enjoy playing games with my friends? Sure. I missed out on downing raid bosses and reliving some nostalgia with childhood friends. However, during quarantine, instead of playing classic WoW, I built 3 terrain tables, I painted 2 armies, hundreds of hours. I redirected from kind of fucking off to my hobby, and I could see physical things in front of me as I painted this, I worked on this, I created this. I get positive reinforcement by posting it online. Most of what I was doing was entirely positive for me because I could see results of what I'm doing. Now, my friends are talking about guild quitting this week after their 100th Mag and Groll raid, and I'm sitting in Discord with them not even 2 hours ago, and they're dreading signing up for raid tomorrow. And they're just they've spent so much time invested in the game where they don't want to really jump out and kind of call it quits and just stop playing. It's it keeps pulling them back in and they can't get out of it. So up on the screen, actually, if you wanted to check the screen this time, this is a character I painted up for my friend. Since I didn't join my friends in their World of Warcraft adventures, I decided to paint my friend's character up on a nice display plinth for a fun project as a Christmas gift. Now, I would have never actually painted this if I was actually playing with them. It was just kind of felt guilty, and he was he got his rogue to full tier 2 raid gear, and I painted the 2 little daggers he had on. That was the gear he used to level 60. In the back of my mind, I wanted to join them in their hardcore world buff meta classic guild with multiple raid nights, but I knew I couldn't commit, so I made a fun project out of it where I painted up his character and learned, as you can see here. I had fun with this. This was fun, but my time, I created a physical object instead of gaming on a character that probably after the next few weeks he's not even going to be playing on it, and that's kind of the end. So those hundreds of hours and memories he had, while they were fun, I have something physical I created, and I improved my talent and improved my skills at just art in general or terrain. I'm not going to be a hypocrite and say I don't exactly play video games anymore. I have thousands of hours logged into Steam, but after quarantine started, I didn't want to lose thousands of hours of painting into gaming, Painting for me is an awesome meditation, and just in general, like terrain specifically, because I just don't feel the stress of like painting Space Marines. I'm getting stressed out trying to highlight, making them look good, making them look clean. It's really low stress to work on terrain, and I'm having fun. The hobby really gives me satisfaction, and I wouldn't have created any of these terrain tables if I was a full-time gamer, back to being global elite, or playing ESCA on Counter-Strike. There's no... if I was a full-time gamer kind of guy, my art, my hobby, my meditation, it would have suffered. In the past month or so, I got through the holidays and COVID by playing Diablo 2 Resurrected. I joined like a YouTuber clan of sorts, and they had a whole Discord and a community, and I proceeded to play an incredible amount of hours of repetitive runs. I didn't paint or work on anything while coughing and kind of sick, and after I finished the Vampire Count's Castle, before Thanksgiving, it was around Thanksgiving to New Year's, I didn't really paint. Was it worth it? No. I didn't really need to do 1,000 Endarial runs on Hell with my Sorceress for 2 Stones of Jordans, little pixels that sit dusty on my Necromancer. As soon as I got those 2 digital items, I mostly stopped playing. This is a topic I could delve into further. I mostly wanted to show off my rogue I painted up and just kind of talk about kind of the pitfalls you could fall in. It's very easy to just take time that you think is efficient and just blast it out. It's not efficient. I remember telling myself that I would run I'm gonna do a few Diablo runs and then I would paint a little bit, and I would not paint whatsoever. It was just lying to myself, honestly. Consuming content, whether it's playing video games or watching TV shows, just honestly do you. I just found what I mentioned in the past 10 minutes really noticeably hampered my productivity. And then I would get stuck in that loop of feeling guilty. I'm not even taking commissions right now. However, I'm still guilting myself for not painting when I should have been. It's not like I'm painting 40, 50, 60 hours like a full-time job. I have this free time at night where it's like, all right, I finish up work, I'm home, girlfriend goes to sleep, ooh, I have an hour or 2 I can work on something. I should be productive. I shouldn't just fuck around. I don't know. I think it just boils down to not lying to yourself and kind of having good habits. If you productively paint for 6 to 8 hours a week during the work week, that's enormous in what you're going to finish over the course of months of painting at this rate, and the skills, and you're leveling up. Just try and be aware of what you're consuming and how effective your time is. If you work a 9 to 5, commute each way, and have a significant other, and you want to have a mild social life, maybe you're painting 10 hours a week. I used to bike to work, I would proceed to work some overtime, I would get home exhausted, and maybe once a week I would paint a few hours in one night. Or I would hit up Wawa or a 7-Eleven, grab some energy drinks, and I would pull that once a week all-nighter. And yeah, I would produce something, I would do a good job, but I was only really painting 1 day a week. Most of the week it was just easier to watch TV or hang out, and instead of just paint. And you could see a lot of YouTubers struggle with this, and that's something where it'll be like, oh, I moved into my new studio, or everything's really going well, I'm doing great in my art side, or they get paid money, they're doing well, and then the burnout hits, and it's just all right. It's a loop of then guilting yourself, I should have been doing this, whatever. Just try and make good habits, and just allocate some time, and just show up. It's the same thing as going to the gym a few times a week or whatever else. You just have to show up consistently, make good habits, but also you're not going to show up to the gym and not be productive. Have an actual workout plan, try and accomplish what you show up to the gym to do. You're going to deadlift, you're going to, what are you doing that day that's going to be productive over a course of many months? The thing is, I love painting, I love building terrain, doing this hobby. I tell myself if I can create good habits, I can sit down and use my time efficiently, I can achieve the results I want. I can level up. So far, it's been really good in quarantine, except for the Diablo 2 debacle, but that's enough of that. I don't think I'll be playing again for a while. Obviously, this is harder than it sounds. I have a girlfriend I live with, and my dog is not a huge fan of me just painting for hours on end with headphones in. They're wonderful, of course. I hobby when I can, but I want to make sure if I'm staying up super late at night, I'm not really fucking around or getting stuck in that Instagram scrolling trap or watching some new season of some show of the month or running another bow run in Diablo. Most people procrastinate. Anyone that has written a paper for a university, or just everyone has procrastinated. Let's be realistic. Most people have bad habits. It's real fucking difficult to get in shape or train for a century ride or run a marathon. You need to have good habits for an extended period of time. You're not leveling up that quick in anything. In this hobby, getting an army painted for a grand tournament, building a display board, that's a march of 200-300 hours or something ridiculous. You have to learn the skills, how to paint the army. It's an entire process. It's not like you could just, this is like a 1 or 2 day thing. Yes, people paint armies in a week or 24 hours or whatever else, but your average person, it's a let's do an 8 to 12 week struggle of finishing out an army. It's not magic, and most people aren't professionals or have access to the correct tool. So part of what I want to do with this podcast or recording or whatever this is be mildly motivational to my fellow hobbyists in the trenches, fighting distractions and the burnout. I could talk about terrain subjects, and maybe I can make that creative spark for you to build your own table or build your own terrain. And I've been successful with a few people. I randomly do get messages of people asking me questions, and that's something I enjoy, just talking about terrain. And if you are familiar with the terrain building Reddit, I post quite a bit, and that's something else where I just love giving advice, looking at people's terrain. There's no burnout on the terrain side. There is on the painting Space Marine side. I'm pretty much done with that. So hopefully I can make a few videos on cool subjects. So one of the video I had planned was going to be how to timeline or checklist an army. I've commission painted about 40 armies. I can give you the whole breakdown, maybe chop off 10 hours of unnecessary steps. I can message you about order of operations, of like what to do when. That'll be a whole video on its own, and I'll just try and, if I can organize you even a little bit, you're saving time, you're being more efficient, and you're not staying up all night. My next video that I'm going to upload right actually at the same time as this episode, so you have actual terrain talk to go into. I'm going to talk about like display boards at big events. Maybe you've never made a display board. I'm going to talk about that, and just talk about the oddity of the size creep going on with display boards, and also this cool castle I built. I'm going to make a narrative campaign this year, which is, again, beer and pretzels, laid back, having fun, some homebrew rules. You're going to see a bunch of nicely painted miniatures and battle reports that are just fun, like good old Warhammer 40k. I'll probably get back to Dungeons & Dragons later on. I honestly haven't played for like the past 2 or so years, but I'm a dungeon master myself, and I can talk at length about that topic. So just maybe I can kind of trigger that creative spark, the elusive feeling in your mind to want to start racing or work on a project. Because honestly, I look at other people's work, and that's usually what inspires me, or hearing someone who's enthusiastic about a topic talk about a topic makes me then want to redouble my efforts and jump right into something. So this spark, or this creativity, it's not entirely random from what I can tell. I've called it a work before purely because I've had that one idea from seeing some picture of some guy build some terrain piece, and I'm just like, yo, I kind of need to work on this right now. If I went to work, I would write it in a notebook. Maybe when I came home, I'd be exhausted. I wouldn't want to work on anything. And if I'm not efficient in my time in the day-to-day and I dilly-dally around, those ideas that I wrote down on Monday, I won't actually work on that piece of terrain, usually ever. I have notebooks filled with this kind of stuff. Maybe you stagnate on painting, maybe you're struggling to get through the work week. If you feel that creativity, you gotta try and work on it. And if you're not efficient with your time, you're never gonna work on it. I've struggled, we all have. Honestly, alright, so I was afraid of airbrushing, and I used to talk shit on people who airbrushed models. I do not know why. I can't give you a good reason other than I was procrastinating and annoyed at myself at that time. I didn't want to learn how to airbrush. All of a sudden, I watched a single YouTube video, and actually it was Scott Miniac, actually. I DM'd him about airbrush stuff, and he responded, and it was like, oh, okay, and it just so happened to align. I got an Imperial Fist commission for Warhammer 30,000, or the Horus Heresy, from an old friend who I did a few other armies I painted. And at that point, I was like, alright, I have to paint a yellow army. If you're not familiar with Imperial Fist for Warhammer, they're bright yellow Space Marines. So, sure, let's learn how to airbrush. I had to paint yellow now. I had to. There's no way to get around it. I took money, I took a job, and you know what? It was a blast. I learned something new, I watched a bunch of educational videos, but the fact that it was, ooh, I got a new toy. And yeah, the army, I only painted it to a tabletop quality, so it's nothing too wild, but I really enjoyed every step of the process of kind of reaching out of my element, trying new stuff, and that creativity spark carried me for months of painting Space Marines. I absolutely hate painting Space Marines in black armor. However, I've done 3 armies in that, unfortunately. So struggling, learning, improving, leveling up, these hours I spent on the hobby, they make me happier than any other video game has. Thousands of hours into CSGO, and yes, I made friends along the way, I have those memories, but my Counter-Strike skills faded. My friends that are raiding in WoW will suffer the same old fate as my priest I leveled back up in the day. It's a fun memory, but I won't really have anything physical to show for it. My 100 hours I played in Cyberpunk, it was chill, but I can barely tell you what I did for 90% of my time in that game, except drive around, do some quests. It was fairly mindless. I wasn't producing anything. I wasn't improving on myself. And at this point in my life, I'm only going up from here. If I focus my time correctly, will succeed in painting and whatever kind of art projects I want to work on. I have almost every model and every tool I could want right now. I have at least 2 years to 3 years of work if I literally don't buy anything new except paint and glue. I have a few unbuilt Titans to work on. I literally have a Warhound Titan from years ago in a box that I want to make into terrain this year. I'm absolutely hyped for that project, but if my time's not efficient, maybe I'll never get to it. It'll be one of those pile of shame things that are terrifying when you see people say like, oh yeah, I have like multiple armies unbuilt. Come on, you gotta do something about that. You gotta, it just takes that first few steps. Same thing as starting anything fitness related. You just have to start the good habits, paint X amount of hours a week, and just do things regularly. Anyway, so as I close up this episode, and thanks for listening, this is also going to be on the shorter side of the other episodes. So basically I'm going to upload 2 types of episodes per week. One is going to be a ramble about what I'm working on, like, alright, I have a Trader Guard Vrax army from Forge World I want to start working on, tons of weapon teams, it's like an armored company, it's awesome. I got an Inquisition army, I have like a bunch of stuff I really want to work on, and I'm going to talk about that, including mostly building terrain. So the second video I'll upload per week is the same kind of format as this, but I'll discuss an actual topic and stay on that topic. And about once a month, I'll upload an actual video where I work on something and do like a time lapse with music and like kind of like the previous videos I've uploaded. I'm not great at video editing, learning Adobe Premiere. Right now you're getting some OpenShot or Windows Movie Maker. It's low quality, but hopefully I have enough enthusiasm to sort of carry this through. I got a collaboration with Narb Makes with the Dune Wind Trap is what I'm painting right now. And that's the next planned video outside of these twice a week sort of podcast uploads. So the second episode, if you want to click on that, I'm going to upload is you can hear me talk about a fun conversation I had with a local painter, far better than me, discussing display boards, scale creep, and kind of just awkwardly large pieces of terrain and how to work on them. I'll wrap this up. Thanks for listening. I wanted to see if I could drop knowledge, motivate the few people that listen, and give you some productive content while you paint to put on in the background. You could subscribe here if you want to hear more or watch me work on terrain. I'll upload these recordings to other platforms after I make about 10 or so. Again, we're talking about procrastination. Let me upload some. Alright, and then you can also follow me at SteveFamine on Instagram. My Instagram's pretty active. YouTube, we're still starting. This is a very new channel going on. But anyway, thanks for listening to my struggle we have going on, and expect to hear a lot more from me.